Good morning and happy Monday to everyone. And welcome to another episode of Brief Let's Talk About It podcast. And as always, we have another amazing guest for you guys. But before we get started, I would like to remind people that this is for entertainment purposes only. Now, as we start to go on, I'm going to give you a brief introduction of who my guest is, and feel free to ask questions as we go. So, Christina, Christina is a widowed single mom to two teenage boys and best-selling author of her book Empowered by Discomfort. She lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and in her free time, you are likely to find her snowboarding with her sons, hiking with the dogs, and pet litter. So without further ado, let me bring on my next guest. Good morning, Christina, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Yes. So am I. So am I. How was your Thanksgiving before we get started?
It was actually wonderful. I was in New York with my in-laws, with my late husband's family. So it's always nice to see them and to be with them.
It's always a good time spending time with family. Now, before we get started, introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Cristina Ramirez. I'm a best-selling author. I'm an award-winning coach, a motivational speaker, and I lost my husband to cancer in 2021, and it was 7 weeks between when he was diagnosed to his passing. So it was it was a shock. It was really a very difficult, fast experience, and I wrote the book, Empowered by Discomfort. It's not a grief book necessarily, but what I realized is that the tools that I used to get through the worst year of my life, which was 2022, he died
Right.
December 9th, 2021. So 2022 was really the worst year of my life. And I realized that what I was doing to get me through that year was the same things that I have been teaching my clients for years. So I kind of used my own tools on myself and I wrote the book about that.
Nice. Very nice. Now I want to ask the question, how was everything before the diagnosis, leading up to the diagnosis?
So I think, hindsight is always 2020 and we can look at our life backwards, but we have to live forward. And looking back, I think there were probably clues that something was wrong medically with him, with my
Mhm.
husband, but he was young and foolish and didn't do anything about it. And by the time he started feeling really ill. And by the time that we went to the hospital, like to the ER, it was too late. His cancer was very aggressive and he didn't really have a chance. So he was diagnosed, I think it was like October 23rd. He went into surgery 2 years ago today, the Monday after Thanksgiving. And he spent 11 days in the ICU. And eventually, he was always of the mindset of, like, if I can't go back to skiing, I don't want to go. Like, I don't, like, that's it. Like, I'm done. And
Mhm.
so, after 11 days in the ICU, he mouthed to me like, "Help me," and because he was still kind of conscious, he was in a ventilator, but he was still semi-conscious, and I didn't know how. So I got my journal and I wrote like the alphabet on it, and I would go like A, B, the letters. And if it was a letter that he wanted, then he would blink, and that's how we communicated that day. And
Okay.
and he went to L, then he went to E, then he went to T. So it was like let me, and then he went to D. And I know what was going to come next. He said, "Let me die," and then we had to have a meeting with the doctors, and I had to argue with the doctors to be able to take my husband off life support, which was a really difficult and uncomfortable place to be. But
Right.
he was so clear in his wishes that I was going to follow through. And, then I called my sons to come to the hospital to say goodbye to their dad, and they took him off life support that evening.
Wow. Wow. That's a lot to bury, carry as a spouse, to have to make. decision. And my heart is with you.
Thank you.
My heart is definitely with you. And it happened at a time during COVID, right?
It
So
was, yeah,
that's a challenge.
it was towards the end of COVID. So it wasn't when, like there were some restrictions of what I could do and couldn't do or how long I could be with him. But fortunately, um, I was with him basically the 11 days that he was in ICU. I was able to be with him, and that made a big difference to me. To know that I did everything that I could, that I was there, and that I was able to, to help him in whatever capacity that I could during that very difficult time.
Right. So now, after all of that, you have to move on. I mean, you have to get on with your life because you have two children, right? So in a lot of ways, you have to set aside your grief. Or was that something that you kind of integrated and helped your sons move through as well? Because they've just lost their father. You still have to be a mother and provide and all of those things. How how did that change
Yeah. So
during the
it's
process?
funny because we were watching a TV show the other day, and like this guy loses his wife, and it's like 2 years later, and he's like all bearded and he's gone crazy and he's like all a mess. And I look at my boys, I'm like, aren't you glad that I didn't go crazy, when your dad died? And they both look at me like, so
Did you go crazy?
So I was like, here I was thinking that I did like this amazing job, and like they still think I'm crazy. But I think, my I couldn't I knew that if I hid my grief and I was like, I'm gonna be strong, then it was just going to prolong this misery that I was in. And so I
Right,
was very open about my grief. Like if I cried, I cried. And if that happened to be in the middle of the supermarket, then so be it. I wasn't concerned about how I looked to the outside world. I was concerned with being vulnerable and with being transparent, because my willingness to show my grief, I think, would give permission to my kids to feel theirs. I think that if we try to hide it, then they think that maybe they should feel something different than what they're feeling, and they shouldn't. Like they should just feel whatever it is that they feel. And so if you're open about it and you're just like, well, this is what it is, guys. I think that in the long run, even though they think I went crazy, I think in the long run it helps, because it's not something that's hidden. It's just what happened. It's just how we dealt with it.
right. Now I have to ask because you are the mother of two young men, and there's a lot of things that young men we don't handle very well, right? And so you're still doing the motherly, thing and raising your children and things like that. How did the kids react and moving forward to the loss of their father?
Yeah, well, what I read is that like teenage grief is different than an adult grief, and so
Right.
they of course, were devastated. I mean, they were so close to their dad. We were a super close knit family, and he was the love of my life. It wasn't like, oh, like in the strange like it wasn't. Like we were very tight, so it was a huge loss for them. But I think that they feel the loss differently. They feel the loss when they have an issue and they don't have their dad to talk to. They have me, or they are, milestones. My son is graduating from high school, like things that they wish their dad could be there for them and they're not. So I think that their grief comes in these milestones and in these moments. And I can't take that away from them. And I wish I could. I wish I could like get their pain and suck it up for them, and bear it myself so that they wouldn't have to do that. But I can't. So I feel like my role is to, when it happens, when, like when their sadness comes, like to give them the space to feel what they have to feel and to support them in whatever way I can. And at the same time, like, I talked to their uncles and to any male role model that I had, like that like people that were close to us, and they've really stepped in. And I think my boys know that there are male role models and father figures that they can go to, if needed, or if they can, so that it's not just estrogen around them, but that they have that different point of view. That, I mean, I can't have a point of view that I don't have. Like, I'm not a man, like I'm not a dad, I'm a mom. Like, I can't be what
True.
I'm not. And I don't pretend to be that what I'm not either.
See, and I love that you said that because I have known, a few families that have lost their significant other, and it's as the one that really stuck out to me was a male, a father, and he's the father of two girls,
Mm,
and he suppressed his grief so much and took on a role as father and mother to try to nurture and learn how to be there for his girls while trying to grieve, the loss of his spouse as well.
yeah.
And when I talked to him, he goes, "Man, it was the most difficult thing I've ever done because like they're used to their mom and things like that, and she's the nurturing type, and I'm the male, so there was no misconfusion of the roles that they were playing, but now he's having to be both." And I go, "What was the biggest challenge?" He goes, "Well, honestly, trying to be emotional for with my daughters and not even understand the emotions that I was going through
Mm, yeah.
himself, right?" And I think that is huge and it's very important, as you said, having male role models when it comes down to men, but also, the importance because he didn't have anyone to reach out to, like a sister or something like that. Like, hey, what am I doing? I'm in this world, saying how am I supposed to help these girls navigate this, but he eventually grew with it and became a really loving father. Like he understood that you can't take the role of the significant other. You can only improve on your parenting when it comes down to raising your daughters, and vice versa when it's raising your sons. And I love that you said I can't do something that I'm not, that I'm unfamiliar with. And I think a lot of people get caught up in there.
Yeah.
And
And
you
I
get
think,
that.
yeah. And I think also, my boys were teens, so I don't know if that makes a difference or not. They were 14 and 16 when their dad died, but I think that in a way it helped because they could reason and I could talk to them. And
Mhm.
and just tell them, it's like, I like, God, I wish that this wasn't our story. I really do. But unfortunately it is. And they're gonna end up in some therapist couch at some point, and they're gonna be like, because my mother, blah, 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 blah. Like, I don't know what exactly it is. We all have that, whether you've lost your
Right. Yeah.
not. Um, and I just tell them, is like, just know that, like, it wasn't for lack of love, and it wasn't for lack of trying. Like, I'm doing the best that I can with what I've got. And I make a ton of mistakes. And when I lose it, like, I apologize when because I'm always the worried kind. I was the strict one, and my husband was the easygoing one. So sometime we had this rule that, like, they ask for something, my automatic is no, right? And they're like, "But why?" I was like, "I don't know, because it's easy. It's no. It's so much easier than saying yes to something." Um,
Right.
so we have this rule that they can ask a couple, like two times, but if I say no twice, then it's a no. And I have no idea where I was going with this, but they like, I don't know, like, there are decisions that come that I don't have the answers to. Um,
Right.
I have, like, my parenting committee, like, I have people that I reach out to and be like, "Hey, I'm, like, this is going on. I think I'm handling it this way. What do you think?" So I get advice, obviously, from people that I know. Um, but that's just their story. And as long as they know that I wasn't trying to harm them, I wasn't, like, so consumed by something else. Like, they are my number one priority. They and as long as they know that, there's nothing else I can do, like it's you
True.
can't give more than what you've got. And that's a good lesson for them also in their future, that they can't do more than they can, than their best. Like that has to be enough.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because there's a lot of people, including myself, right? After I experienced my worst loss, I was like, I was trying to go outside of the box to make sure that everyone else was okay, and I neglected myself
Hmm.
in a lot of ways. And there was a reason for that. I didn't want what I was feeling to be pushed on other people. So it was either I was going above and beyond to make sure that everyone was okay, which I realize now that I should have been taking care of me first,
Hmm.
right? But also, the approach that I was taking was was not the best choice, right? Because I was it was either isolation,
Mm.
or I'm saying I was going, I was just pushing it to the extreme in the other direction. And it wasn't until I hit that rock bottom, that dark well. And like you said, we all go through those moments, the dark side of grief, right? When we lose someone. And you had, you mentioned earlier, your hardest year was 2022.
Hmm.
You know, can you walk me through that year? Walk us
Yeah,
through that year.
because I don't want to sit here and pretend like I made a billion mistakes, right? And I had
Okay.
a lot of fear because, and for me, my fear was like, at first, I wanted my kids to have the life that they would have had their dad been alive.
Mm,
And it took me a long time to understand that that wasn't possible because the mold was broken. So everything that our dreams, our goals, the things that we wanted to do, it required two parents. And I didn't have to. They didn't have two parents anymore. It required two incomes. It required two, and we don't have that. So I think for the beginning, I was just trying to breathe. I was just trying to like to breathe and make it, because the grief was so intense and it felt like it was relentless. So because he died in December, so it was literally like the year.
oh,
So I think like the beginning was just like, okay, like just breathing. um but we had a special circumstance where I live in New Mexico. And so my kids' high school was not in the town that I lived in, because I lived in a really small rural town. And the school, it's a public school, but they live at the dorms at the school. And they were
right.
miserable and I was miserable. So I had to move. And that consumed a lot of my energy, moving our whole life to this different city. Um, but I was in that process of like, I've just got to get stuff done. I've got to make this move. I've got to keep my clients. I've got to keep making money. That gave me like where I would put my attention. Once I was able to breathe a little bit without like losing it every 2 seconds, that was my focus. But even as I focused on those things, I tried to just maintain, like to honor my grief. I did like in that, from, I don't know, from like May to September, um, I, I was like, okay, this is it. I'm going to scale my business. Because now we were all living together and I felt a little bit more settled. And I was so afraid that I wasn't going to be able to provide for them, that I wanted to make sure that I was going to make as much money as possible and grow my business because, my kids needed it. And I failed, not that I failed, like I grew my business and then I hated it. Like I grew up, I built a business that I hated to run because I was just doing what somebody else was telling me to do and not
Right.
what really was coming from me. So they don't understand my circumstances and they don't understand, my where I'm at. And so it required me to do things that weren't really in alignment with who I was at that time. So that all came crashing down in about October. And, I let go of my sales team. I just imploded. And that's when I wrote the book. And
Okay.
yeah. And, because that was what was in my heart to do. And 2023, which is this year, I think I was still figuring out, well, what do I do? Like if the business that I had that I grew isn't what I want, then what do I want? And
Right.
I don't I don't even know if I think I know now, but I'm just much more relaxed about it. Just like it's like I have enough evidence that everything is going to be okay, whether because I know my kids are never going to go hungry because I'm not going to allow that to happen. That if I have
Right.
to take, if I have to work 4 jobs and what that, like, I'll do it. It's fine. So that allows me to just like live a little bit more in uncertainty and in ambivalence, which before I couldn't, before I had to know what was going to happen because that, like, I was like, my sanity required that. It doesn't require that anymore.
Nice. I love that. And you touched on something, um, about how you did your grief, right? And listening to other people. It's always funny, like everybody always has the answer about how we're supposed to do it, right? Um, and they don't understand. And the reason, and I don't say that in a disrespectful way, because everybody has an understanding of how they will deal with it,
Right.
or they have a somewhat understanding because it changes. And I speak from experience, and I think you do as well. Grief has no blueprint, so you do grief the way that you feel, and sometimes you may have to change the way you do it on a daily basis, maybe on a moment to moment basis. It's crazy how that goes. And you did the one thing that a lot of people do, and I even did it myself. Started a company, right? I said I'm going. That's where I started my first company, which was my personal training company. And I was like, you know what? This is what I'm good at. I know the human body, saying the different types like the back of my hand. Very knowledgeable. Nutrition, vitamins, you name it, working out. I got it down packed, right? And I'm gonna make it convenient for people. I got my workout, I got my gym. I set up as, at my garage, I set up as a gym. And I said, and I did the same thing that you said. I'm going to grow my business um, as big as possible, make as much money as I possibly can, and things like that. And it's so similar, to hear you say, when I was done, I was like, oh no, I don't want to do this anymore. But I held on to it because there was something about it. Um, when I started my company, it was in memory of my son.
Mm,
And because I was telling my son, because I was bodybuilding, I was personal training when he was alive. And I said, you know what? I'm gonna show him how to build a business.
mm,
And when he passed away, I kind of let it fall to the wayside. And then when my mother passed away, I said I need to do something, and I did. I grew it, and and I was miserable when it happened. And the best, and the crazy part about it is the best thing that happened is that I lost everything. And it
mm,
sounds crazy, right? But in my situation, I had no, I have no kids. My parents are gone. It's just me. So what am I doing it for? Pretty much to keep myself busy, because I didn't want to deal with the aspect of, or yeah, I didn't want to deal with the aspect of having to deal with the losses, right?
mm,
Busy myself. And when I lost everything, it put me back in a perspective and said, no, you have to deal with this, Tony.
mm,
You you have to you have to acknowledge that your world has changed, right? And there's no one that's going to have answers for you. So we're going to have to walk this path until we can figure this thing out. Now, the downside to it is, and also the upside, there's a double-edged sword. The downside to it was that I was alone. I
mm,
didn't have anyone to go to because I didn't think anybody would understand, hey, I just lost a child, and the emptiness and the pain that was there. I could not explain. I could not explain it whatsoever. Um, Now the upside to it is that I was alone, and it put me in a situation to where I had to go through a dark moment, or
mm,
I had to go through several dark moments. because that loss, not only was it a blessing, it was a curse, because at the same time, when I lost everything, I was in a different state. So, you know what I'm saying? It wasn't like, where am I going? Right. I'm in a state, I'm like, it's negative 36 degrees out. I just lost everything. What do I do now? Right. So I'm always good at surviving
Mm,
no matter where I'm at. So I can always fall back on those instincts. What do I have to do in order to survive so I don't freeze to death? Okay, I got my vehicle. Let's figure this thing out. What is the next step? Well, I got to get rid of everything that I have, because now I have to get back to a place to where I'm familiar and I can move around. Maybe I can go crash on my friends' couches for a while to figure it out. And that was the crazy part, because when I got back to Colorado, I surrounded myself with entrepreneurs yet again, right? And so, now I'm going, okay, I'm going to follow this path. Uh, Failed miserably, man. Uh, and that's honestly, just like yourself, you wrote a book and I started a nonprofit.
mhm.
And I listen to it and I'm laughing because I'm going, wow, this is it's such a familiar path, right? Similar, very, very similar. But you had snowboarding. How is in Santa Fe, New Mexico, how is snowboarding out there? I'm in Colorado and
It's
I've tried
amazing.
snowboarding.
Yeah,
Is it?
so I live in northern New Mexico, and I think when people think New Mexico, they think, Breaking Bad and the desert in the south. But I'm 50 miles from Colorado, or I was, where I used to live was just 50, 60
Okay.
miles from Colorado. So it's the Rockies, and the snow is great. And what's great is that not that many people know about it. So it's not, it's not those huge lines. It's not a really developed. There's one very developed ski resort, but the rest are smaller, less developed. So it's actually it's very good. I enjoy it thoroughly. But
Nice.
yeah.
And then see, I didn't know you was 50 miles outside of Colorado. I was like, all right. And so you understand. And I've
Mhm.
tried snowboarding before, right? Um, let's just say I am not equipped to do snowboarding or skiing or any of that stuff. So I'm the guy that if you are snowboarding, I will be on the sidelines rooting you on.
There we
But
go.
as far as being out there, no.
Yeah.
I've
And
had
you're
too
cold.
many
At least if
troubles.
you're snowboarding, you're not as cold as, as the person sitting waiting, or just like so. But it's a lot of fun. And I think, it's really important to have things that just make you feel good, whatever that is. For me,
Yeah.
it's snowboarding and swimming. I love swimming. Um, for other people it can be walking or hiking, or it can be whatever, like knitting, it doesn't matter, but just something that connects you to like the essence of you, like to that you're just out there, and everything, just you forget about everything, and you're just in the moment. And whatever that is for you, whether that's going to the gym or being on a mountain or crocheting or whatever, it doesn't matter. But if you have that, like you have to make the time to do that for yourself, you know? And the
I
other
love
thing that I learned is that I think I let go of this notion that there's a guarantee, right? Like I guess I always lived in that, like, do unto others as you would have done to you. And as long as I do the right thing, then everything is gonna be okay. And that is just not true. It's just not true. Right. Like,
it.
so I I feel like I got so like I had a horrible addiction issue in my 30s. I got sober. I'm 20 something years sober. It's like I did the right things. I did everything by the book, and I still got this, right? Like I still got this enormous pain that I never saw it coming. So there are no guarantees that just because you do the right thing that everything is going to be okay. But there is the guarantee that if you do the right thing, you will know that you did the right thing and that you can't do any better than that. And that has to be enough. And I think that's my latest, like, moment of understanding that it has to be enough. And that's that.
I love that you said that.
I don't know if it's me or you, Tony. All right, guys, it looks like Tony's having some connection issues. So I'm just going to put myself on hide over here and hopefully he will be able to come back soon.
Okay, we are back. Internet is doing some crazy stuff right now. Sorry about that, Christina.
No problem. I
Yeah.
actually told them, I was like, oh, looks like Tony left, but hopefully he'll be
Hold
back
on.
soon.
Um,
Can you hear me?
can't hear you. Let's make sure that we got everything real technical. Hold on, real quick. All right, give me 1 second here.
No problem.
It knocked me off of my Wi-Fi.
Uh-oh.
We have technical difficulties.
Yeah. If that's the worst that happens,
Okay,
we'll be
cool.
fine. Can you hear me now?
Okay. All right, give me a second here. Come on now, where you at? Come on now, where you at? Come on, where you at? Give me a second here. It's taking a minute. Give me a second. It kicked me off of my Bluetooth.
You may not. Can you hear me? No, he can't hear me.
No. There we go. Huh. All right, let's do. There we are. There we go. Now, we should be able to bring this back up.
Can you hear me?
It's not. Hold on, give me a second. Yeah, the problem is that I can't hear you. Give me. Connect that. Can you hear me?
I hear you fine.
Can you hear me? No,
Mhm.
I still can't hear you. No? How about now?
I hear you just fine. Can you hear me?
No.
No, you can't.